So anyways, thanks so much for being here. I just wanted to introduce Rudi Schwab, the director of Closed on Sundays. Next to him, Henry Corra, Same Sex America, and Rebecca Dreyfus, the director of Behind Stolen. And if you guys, I'm always kind of interested just to hear about stories about how you even got started in nonfiction filmmaking. So maybe if you can just sort of talk about your background or how you really got your start in the industry.
Okay. You want to start?
Sure.
Well, I was an art school person, went to art school, and after college I went to the University of North Carolina, moved out to Los Angeles. I spent about 10 years out there. I was a fashion celebrity photographer. That got me into a lot of photographers that I was assisting out there, guys like Herb Ritz, Peggy Sirota, Matthew Ralston, were guys that started also shooting music videos, and so they were photographers also shooting a motion picture. So to me, that was a great crossover. It was great. So as I was assisting them, I learned stills and motion picture. Then from that led me to start shooting myself. I started as a cinematographer, and basically fashion shoots. I would always bring my 16 millimeter cameras, and just I started putting a reel together that way. And then I was out in LA for about 10 years, and I was on a trip back to Boston, and I grew up in New York City, but went to high school in this area. Hooked up with an old friend of mine again, and we started a production company in '98, Element Productions, and we're now New York, Boston based, and we shoot commercials. We do TV shows and some programming, for like Discovery Channel, things like arts and entertainment, different things like that, but mostly commercials is what I shoot. I always loved documentary. Big Errol Morris fan. I know in town. Who's also a commercial guy. And so I got to know him a lot, and I love his work. And I got into documentaries just because now you can do it with a small camera, and it's real easy to run around. I shot, got a couple of little mini DV cameras, and it was easy to start. I got into this story because it was a personal story, and so that just enabled me to start shooting. And we've got a core of editors at our office, and so I would come in and they'd start digitizing stuff for me, and I'd start putting the project together that way, and that's how I got to here. I filmed for about a year, and we just finally got our cut recently. So.
Mm-hmm. Right, and if I could just interrupt, I think that they probably want us to use the microphones just because of the camera.
Sure. Okay.
Not really for the audience as much as it's just for the webcast. So, all right. So, thank you. Yep. So, Henry, how did you get?
So, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and came to New York when I was right out of college. My brother and I moved to New York. It was like a big dream for us. My brother was a very famous avant-garde cellist who played with John Zorn, and he sort of went right into that music scene. I was plopped right into this very experimental music scene, kind of not even knowing why I wanted to move to New York at the time. Mm-hmm. And I saw a documentary in that first year called Grey Gardens, made by the Maisel brothers. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was the most incredible film I had ever seen in my life. The oddest, there's a quote about the film, the oddest, most beautiful film. And I was really kind of obsessed with the film. And my brother said to me, you should go, they're New York-based filmmakers, these two brothers named Maisel, it sounded very odd to me. And I was like, he said, you should just go, see if you can get a job there. And so I walked into their studio on 54th Street, 23 years old, sat down and talked to them for a little while, and they said, by the way, what are you doing this afternoon? And they had some work in the bag for me. That was it. It was really that was the truth, and I stayed there for 12 years. And, David Maisels was really my mentor. He and Albert were honored last night. This is David's wife and daughter here in the audience. And so I did. I started off, went up through the ranks there as a PA. And we made commercials. Yep. I helped them develop their real people commercial side of their business, and I finally, in my late 20s, started directing for them. And I made a film about the artist Christo called Umbrellas, and that was really like my first. Well, I actually did a project before that I don't talk about too much, but it was for WGBH, and it was a Nova program on reversing heart disease. And it was kind of, I don't know, it was I consider Umbrellas my first film. So,
but it's,
I tell you something odd is my father thinks that's my father's favorite film that I've ever done.
Oh, really?
The reversing heart disease one. But anyway.
But it's so different in terms of just, formal structure. I mean, like a Nova piece is so radically different than anything that you would do with measles.
I was hardcore measles at that time. And the sort of unfiltered reality, no scripts, no voiceover, no narration, really shooting tons of footage, and it didn't really fit
with this dry kind of scientific presentation.
So that was
heart disease or whatever you're doing.
That was an interesting.
No, it wasn't dry. I don't think so. She liked it.
No, but it was a tough fit, and then I made the film about the artist Christo with the measles. And that was the first film, and after that I broke away and started Corra Films, and I'm a New York-based filmmaker. The Corra Films exist. We've made many documentaries over the last 10 years, and we exist by doing commercials as well, which seems to be, if Errol Morris can do it, then you and I can do it, right? And I did a film called George that was aired on HBO in 2000. That's about my autistic son, George. And last year I made a film called Frames that was at the Tribeca Film Festival. That's about an experimental, kind of a very innovative, interactive video artist called Graham Weinbrand. And then this year we're here with a film called Same Sex America, which follows the whole battle for gay marriage in Massachusetts through the eyes of 7 families, I would call them.
Rebecca?
I think I started becoming interested in making documentaries because of my dad, who was born in pre-Nazi Germany. He was a German Jew, and his family had gone to Shanghai, and he would never talk about it, and I would always ask him questions, and he would never answer them. So I think it sort of really got me going on just wanting to talk to people and ask them questions, because my dad would never answer my questions. So I kind of wanted to make a film about him, but that never worked out. So then I found other people that would answer questions. So I started to make documentaries with other people.
So you have your father to thank for his reluctance to talk to you.
That's right. He's reticent. He drove me out into the world to talk to other people. And I made Stolen's my second feature. I made a film called Bye Bye Babushka, which is portraits of 3 Russian women who were born before the revolution. And it's about their lives under communism.
So I'd love, just for the audience's sake, just for you to talk a little bit, just a brief synopsis sort of your film. But the first question that I had for you guys is really, was there a personal connection that you had with a subject in your film, or what was the first sort of germ of the idea for you to kind of follow this? Because obviously, when we think about independent cinema, there's no more independent cinema than documentary filmmaking. I mean, the funding is just, very dire and non-existent, and it's a real commitment of oftentimes like 4 or 5 years of your life, to like follow it all the way through, actually find the time to shoot it, find the time and money to edit, and then distribute it and everything like that. So I'd be curious to hear, like, what, was it a personal attachment to somebody in the film that started it, or was it just a general interest in the subject matter?
Yeah, for me, I just would not have even have gotten into the story. My story's about the kind of the state of the Catholic Church in Boston now, and it's not necessarily a it's more told. It's told through the eyes of people in the pews, parishioners, regular Catholics, And so my church in Charlestown, I'm a Catholic. I go. There's one church in Charlestown that I kept going to, and you kind of attach yourself to these. Great guys, and there was this one guy who's a big part of the film, Father Bob Bowers, was a good friend, and just a wonderful man that really spoke the mission of what a church in an urban environment should be. And he's a wonderful guy, great guy. came to that town, which is a town filled with lots of division, and even amongst Catholics, and changed things. And so and then all of a sudden, then once this whole reconfiguration thing came up, that was launched by the Archdiocese again, which is kind of like the second wave of kind of abuse of people in town. Like just 2 years ago, you had the sex abuse. Now they're going to close 90 churches. So all of a sudden, people are like, what are you talking about? And the church in Charlestown, which was led by our priest, got chosen to close, and it made no sense. It's like, wait a minute, this is what a church should be about. And so the film, so I attached myself to him. He gave me great access. Obviously, it's always about access, and I followed him around, followed a lot of his story, and then that led me into some of the other communities in Boston. But he became a friend, and I was able to spend time with him, and I filmed for most of last year, so that was the kind of access I got.
And through him, you found the other churches and the other.
Well, then once the story broke again, and it was in all the papers, and people were protesting, what was going on again. Then I started, then going to some of the other churches, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to paint a picture of the different parishes throughout the urban environment of Boston. I went to Roxbury, I went to East Boston, the real ethnic communities, and attached myself to parishioners there as well. And I got some just great insight as to what church means in a community. And it doesn't matter if you're Catholic or Jewish or whatever for this film. The connection I think we've gotten with some of our interviews is what faith is, and there a lot of times there was a confusion for people between the church and their own spirituality. So we make those distinctions in the film, and it's very honest. And the best thing I got from the film, and some of the things that moved me the most, and moved people, and a lot of people have said, it's the honesty and some of this real straightforward kind of intelligence from very normal, people from urban environments that you wouldn't expect when you put a camera in their face. There, all of a sudden, their eloquence came out, and they were wonderful.
Right, and it's interesting because that's a perfect kind of way to segue into Henry's film in a way, because I think that both of your films share a similarity in terms of the subjects in your film are so passionate about what's happening. I mean, it's devastating, really. Like, it's devastating that they feel like, their house of worship is going to be dismantled and destroyed. And like for you in same-sex America, it's the same thing. Like how these loving couples are feeling like they're under attack, and their children feel like, they should be shameful of what's going on in their households, which is just that they're raising a beautiful family. Right.
On the other side, people really care about this issue.
Yeah.
People are
on both sides, right?
The idea for the film came just. I'd finished 2 personal films and was looking for. I'm always like just reading the paper and going online and thinking of, we always have a lot of balls in the air in terms of ideas, but this one just I read about the Goodrich decision, and I said, I've got to make this film. It's like, I grew up in the South. I was a little kid during the Civil Rights Movement, but it reminded me of that, and the inherent drama and this amazing chapter in civil rights history. Right. These people who wanted to get married. It was so dramatic. I wasn't, primarily motivated politically. I'm not I have my points of view, of course, about this, but I was drawn to this story, and I saw it as really important. And anyway, so people, one of the first I pitched the idea I got my funding for this from Showtime, and I pitched it to them, and one of the questions they asked was so, do people really care about this issue? And so I came up to the State House on February 11th and did a trial day of shooting, February 11th, 2004. Wow. I don't know if any of you were around. This is a Boston crowd, but the passion in that room that day and outside and all over the state was incredible. And so I came back to Showtime and they green-lighted the film right away. So,
right.
Yeah.
Wow. And what was your sort of initial point of contact? Like, what was the first family or first couple that you?
The process. Well, Again, I filmed those 2 days and probably found half the people who ended up in the situation is that the film goes from February 11th, 2004 to the end of the summer 2004. So it's through all of the constitutional conventions and all the thwarted attempts to block same-sex couples getting their marriage licenses, which started on May 17th, and then the weddings that occurred after. So that's the sort of arc of the film. And then Bush, during that summer and during the conventions, trying to institute to block it on a federal level. So that's the kind of arc of the story. And half the people I found right at the State House. They literally, it's very rare in our kind of filmmaking, but the characters that we stuck with showed up in front of the camera during those 2 days. It was so rich on both sides. The religious, the traditional family advocates and the couples and the politicians and everybody. And then the rest of it, it's really kind of like investigative reporting. We just send recruiters and go out all over the state and literally interview hundreds of people and find, the ones. It's a little different from journalists because we're finding people that we can connect with and kind of move in with and have a very intimate relationship with, but also the ones that kind of told the whole story. So.
That's great, and that's a perfect segue into Rebecca, because I think it's interesting when you talk about access, and I don't know, like approaching. I mean, as a filmmaker, looking at a film like Stolen, which you can describe briefly to the audience if they haven't seen your film yet, but I don't even know where to begin to try to make a movie about this in terms of the issues of access, or trying to really find interesting characters that could give you enough information to piece some story together, because it's confounded the world's best detectives, so talk about the challenges, and also just what kind of kept fueling you to move forward when you would hit stumbling blocks, or if you even had those kinds of limitations when you were making your film.
Well, I guess I was sort of motivated just by a personal connection to the place and to the robbery itself. I really loved one of the paintings that was taken, and it sort of haunted me. And also because in Isabella Stewart Gardner's will, they can't take the empty frames, off the wall. So if any of you have been to the Gardner and you go in the Dutch room, it's kind of really spooky in there, and it just kind of haunted me. And I thought about it for a really long time, and before I ever even, thought about making a film about it. So when I started to make the film, it really kind of just very quickly took on a life of its own. And it definitely was an issue. Like we didn't really have access to the museum, which was sort of the central focus of the story. So I guess a lot of what we did was actually what you're talking about, is like trying to figure out, okay, how do we piece this story together? And I guess for me, I really wanted to be sure to include a very broad cast of characters, because what was particularly interesting to me about the story was that you had such an eclectic array of people in the same story, from like Vermeer and Rembrandt to Isabella Stewart Gardner to like modern day thugs. And that I think attracted me a lot to the story, so I wanted to be sure to include all of that in the film. So I think I just sort of pieced together these different worlds, and that's how the film came to be. But it was, a bit daunting at times to figure out how to approach it.
Right, because in watching the film, like half the time I was just thinking, I don't know why these people are revealing as much as they're revealing, in a way, because I thought, well, isn't it going to ruin their case, or isn't it going to, if someone thinks that they're, hot on their trail, it was just, I was kind of amazed at the access that you actually ended up getting, because as a filmmaker, I would have found it, I would have given up. I don't know how you did it. It was...
Yeah, we were very determined, but it's funny when people were asking us about that last night. A lot of these people are really proud to sort of say that they were behind it, or they did it, and they could get the art back if people would give them the right, deal. So it's a funny bunch, those types, and they really were. It was hard to kind of find them and get to them, but once the camera was there, they were sort of delighted to talk about it.
Wow, fascinating. Henry, I wanted to sort of bounce back to you. One of the most, I think, powerful moments in your film, and I hope I'm not giving away too much, is when you talk to one young woman who's gay, and they're to support her side of the cause, and her parents are also at the rally, but they're on the other side.
Right.
And
oh my gosh,
she didn't know they were even.
And exactly. Could you talk about that? I mean, did she have? Was it a moment that you captured just right there as she realized and you realized? I mean, just talk about that moment.
That was the first day of shooting. That's when I knew I had a good film. So Leah is her name, and she's a friend as well as a subject. And she's become a friend. I didn't know her before that moment. She starts telling her story. Yeah, you do have to see this film. But she starts telling her story and then bursts into tears and sort of says, "And my parents, I ran into my parents this morning, and they're protesting on the other side." So we ended up just this was amazing, and she's this very compelling character, and so we stuck with that story, and there was a kind of reconciliation eventually between. Well, she at least got her parents to agree to sit on the couch next time for their for their cause, as opposed to going out and protesting against her. So
wow.
It was pretty moving.
Wow, it's really amazing. Yeah, I mean, you should see all these films. They're really riveting and very important, and also incredibly timely. So, and going back to your film, what was? I mean, obviously. In some cases, there's sort of a happy ending for some of the churches, some cases not. I mean, for you also, having been a parishioner and at one of the churches, I mean, what was that process like for you? I mean, were you able to divorce yourself enough from the film to have some objectivity, or were you definitely had a specific point of view because you were actually a parishioner at one of these churches that was affected by this decision by the Archdiocese. I mean, could you talk about those conflicts? I mean, were there?
I think the toughest conflict of them all is fighting with being a Catholic nowadays in Boston. I mean, it's, that's the biggest thing, and that's why I went out and did this, because, it's been if you look at the face of what's happened, and it's funny because it's hard for me because I'm doing this because we do these things to change things and to try to get people talking about stuff. Now here's here's a church that's spent since the over the last couple of generations $1 billion to date on sex abuse settlements. $1 billion. 5% of clergy nationwide have been credibly accused of abuse. I mean, people are like, why would you want to be Catholic? So these are the things. In terms of my church closing, I was able to step out of it and say, if this one closes, I'll go to another one. I was able to make that distinction because to me, but what my film looks at is the people in Boston and a lot of urban centers around the country, which this is about to affect. We're told through the years, you know what, you're not allowed to go to any other church other than the church within your border. You're not allowed to go to that church. You can't even get married there. You have to come to our church, put money in this basket. You belong to that church. And now all of a sudden the people are told, we're closing your church because it's the good of the big church. The whole church. So they're told to think parochially for their whole lives, and now, no, you're doing this for the good of. And they're like, "What are you talking about? I've never heard of another." So there's such a disconnect. It's mind-boggling. So I had to do something about it. I've been thrown out of the chancery of the Archdiocese twice. The Archbishop, all the hierarchy, they know who I am. They're not interested in talking. And so that just kept pushing me more. Every time I started pulling back with, because people were very devoted and very emotional, and it comes out in film. And I'm like, how hard do I hit these guys? And the more the time went on last year, the more of these guys they had opportunities to change things and they didn't. And that was the hardest part, and that's what allowed me to, keep going and pushing with this, and to try to show the rest of the Archdiocese, the rest of the country, in terms of the churches that are going through this. I mean, they're going bankrupt in 5 different archdioceses around the country. how not to approach this. That's what hopefully this film will do. So in terms of my church closing, I was able to move on. I moved to West Roxbury now and go to that church. It's fine. But a lot of people, they don't get it. Like, what do you mean? I'm supposed to go here. And now they're closing here. I don't know of anything else. And it's because they weren't told. They weren't explained things. And nothing's been explained to them. And people are just kind of left, it's the whole shepherd analogy. They're totally lost, And, so it's an ongoing struggle with them, So.
Rebecca, I had a question for you, which is... it's more of a question about structuring your film, because, we all know that none of the artwork has been recovered. And I know that for you, it's just sort of following all these different possible leads and like meeting these really wild characters who have all this information, or do they? It's like, it's a real question of who do you believe, who you don't believe, what could possibly be the right track. I mean, how did you even think about how to structure the storylines in your documentary? Like, when does it end? How does it... I mean, I'm sure that was a big struggle for you as well.
Well, I sort of made a deal with myself that, if I was going to follow this one investigator who's going to really actively look for the art, that, regardless of what happened, that we had to have the film end and finish the project. So I kind of had that deal with myself all along, and I guess I just sort of felt at a certain point it was time to stop it. I mean, we worked for a long time. I was very jealous to hear of your shooting schedule.
Well, how long did you shoot?
Nicely contained.
Exactly. Next time. So I just sort of decided at a certain point that it was time to stop. And while we were following, the sort of modern day story, I was also kind of chasing after the story of the past and what had happened with Isabel Stewart Gardner, getting all this art over to America. So I was sort of, concurrently working on both threads. So I think at a certain point I just felt like we had explored a lot of possibilities, and it was just time to stop shooting. It was hard. It was really hard.
Right. Right, because I mean, I imagine as a sort of detective story, I mean, like more and more leads come on, and it's at a certain point, I feel like, especially in your case, it's really hard to choose a stopping point because all of it's so juicy and so insane. Like if you see the film, I mean, like some of these characters are unbelievable, and like you really believe them, and then you wonder, like, well, I don't know if like, what are you talking about the IRA? What are you talking about, like all these other connections? So, anyhow,
yeah, it definitely was hard to stop, and also you do, it does kind of get a hold of you, and you want to believe. I mean, you see when you watch the film, you want to believe them, and you want to think like, oh, if we just follow this guy, for one more month, he's going to bring us to to the art, and you really do have that urge. But so it was hard to stop.
Wow, it's really great.
People are asking us, are you doing a sequel, and what happens when they get the art back? And I'm like, we'll see.
Wow. That's incredible. Now, I wonder, what was did your relationship with the detective and his son change during the course of it? At any point, did they feel reluctant to participate in the film because they felt like, oh, maybe they want the exposure because they think that there is, hopefully with information in the public, that somebody will come forward and give them the hot tip that they need? Or was there a point where they felt like, okay, maybe we're giving you too much? I mean, did that dynamic change between you and your subjects?
No, not really. I mean, I think Harold, who is the lead investigator in the film, I think he is just this very sort of dogged person, and he was really, very convinced we just have to, keep at this and really give it our best shot and keep going. And he never, ever, I mean, when a lot of crazy stuff was going on with some of these people you're talking about, and Susanna, the producer, and I were sort of like, should we be involved in this? And, is this dangerous, and what's going on? And we would ask him, like, well, should we be concerned at all with it? And he said, oh, I can't think about those things. So, we would...
should we go to the safe house? Sure.
And he did sort of treat everybody, whether it was, a museum curator or some kind of shadowy figure. He did treat everybody the same and approach everybody the same, and sort of, I think, guided us a little bit to do that. So we tried to just, plod along with him. But I could say no, he never sort of wavered from his position about getting the art back and his approach to how we should get it back. He was amazingly consistent.
Yeah, for those of you who've seen the film, he's really an amazing character. He's almost like a detective from like a natural show that, he's singularly driven towards that mission of recovering the stolen artwork. It's pretty remarkable. He's a really amazing person.
Yeah, I just, what I'm hearing a lot in this is it's a really interesting subject to me, which is it's really about identifying with your characters totally, no matter who they are. I mean, I had to follow people who I didn't agree with at all politically.
Right.
But it's like, you think of it like, imagine if you're a novelist and you're creating a whole universe of characters. And in order to create I'm not saying that we have that kind of control over our characters, but I'm saying the kind of respect and the kind of identification you have to have with your characters is very akin to fiction, I think. Because in order to truly create the villain, let's say, in your novel, you do have to totally identify with him and respect him.
Exactly.
Where he's coming from. And
take him seriously.
And really take him. That's very well put. And I kind of hear this thread and all. It's a very interesting topic to me. I think about it a lot.
Absolutely.
How it's different from the kind of people you would be perhaps friends with. It's way more intense than that, I think.
It's a very particular relationship.
It's very intense. You're in a kind of contract together. It's interesting, no matter who they are.
Yeah, and I love what I was saying this to you just before the panel started, was just that I was actually surprised. I just made this assumption that you were a Boston-based filmmaker, because there's a level of intimacy that you have, and you really feel this from behind the camera, like this real compassion for both sides. When you talk to the people who are as passionate, and I think that's what it's about. Yeah, exactly.
It's totally connecting and identifying with the people.
Right.
My grandmother's from Boston. Maybe that's what you felt.
Now, have you shown your film to some of the participants?
Some of the subjects, but most of them are going to be seeing it for the first time tonight.
My God!
It's exciting.
Wow. That's
we're a little nervous.
Wow.
Where is it tonight?
Tonight it's showing
at the Museum of Fine Arts at 7:30.
Museum of Fine Arts at 7:30. Yeah.
And your film's at the MFA tonight, right?
Yeah, before 7:30.
Okay, just beforehand, right. Well, now, are people from both sides going to be there? I mean, is it going to be a melee?
So. It's open to, and we want everyone to see it. And
now, was Showtime really, did they give you full creative control, or were they kind of meddling?
No, they were great, actually. I was surprised. I had, I've worked with HBO and other people, and I'd say that Showtime was the most hands-off of any kind of presenter that I've ever worked with, and very, very supportive, and it really worked out. Wow. I was happy. We made exactly the film we wanted to make. And it's the first time I've ever had a screening in the edit room of a rough cut where TV broadcasters were crying and hugging me. So,
That's
usually they're something else.
Not your fault.
Well, I would love to turn it out to our audience if you guys have questions. Yeah.
From Judy Maisels.
You were talking about knowing when to stop filming. How do you know when the film's done? How do you stop?
That's my mother laughing like that.
That's a good question.
I don't know. I think it's just instinctive.
So the deadline?
Well, I had a lot of deadlines, and I went past all of them, I think, you just know. I mean, I just recently finished, so I'm not totally clear about it. Like the film that by Babushka, the one I made before that, really did feel like there was a moment where I was like, it's done. Okay, that's it. It's done. I think I had that moment on this one, but it's still a little too recent for me to be sure I was correct, or I don't know. But I think it's just something you feel.
I had a question. Kind of going back to the conversation that you were all sharing about this notion of being documentary makers and how it requires a certain kind of both deep identification and kind of respect for your subjects. And documentary is weaving its way into the mainstream, and a lot of filmmakers that we talk to, many of those documentary makers are sort of thinking about fiction or maybe on their way to doing fiction. And I just wanted to just ask each of you quickly, sort of, if that was in one of your goals or not, and how you sort of see that those two worlds, where do they meet or where do they collide, or just feedback on that whole notion of, if I'm a documentarian, am I going to be a fiction filmmaker in the future or not? So.
I actually am working on a fiction script right now, and I keep having this instinct to weave in real people and characters into it, or situations. So I actually am thinking about maybe combining the two. I guess because of what you were saying about my main character Harold Smith in my documentary. I don't know if you saw it, but nobody could have dreamt this person up, and if you did and you read it to anyone, they say, "Oh, please, that's just too much,"
exactly.
and that nobody would believe that. So I do think that the real world offers so much rich material, and it is, as a documentarian, a bit challenging to think about making that transition and not just running into a guy like that and suddenly you have this amazing character for a film. But I think it's something that it feels like a little bit of a different muscle or something that I'm very sort of interested in and would like to try. I've made one short fiction film and really, really enjoyed working with actors, and that's something you don't, get at all when you're making documentaries. So I think I'm really interested in doing that. But
yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting. I don't see so much of a distinction between fiction and nonfiction. It seems to be overemphasized a lot. I see a distinction between filmmakers who like to work to figure the film out as they go along, and who like to be surprised as they go along, and then people who actually can create their vision and pre-conceptualize and then execute. That's where that's the distinction I see. And I think I worked with Harmony Korine, who works with scripts and actors and everything, but he is totally looking for the unexpected all the time, and his film, when he shoots, the footage speaks to him, and he finds the shape of the film through the editing process, which is exactly what we do. So I think it's more of an approach difference than a fiction non-fiction discussion, which is
And how about yourself, just personally? Where are you headed with narrative film, fiction film?
I make narrative films. I tell stories. I know what you mean, though. Do I want to make a Hollywood movie or a scripted movie? I'm not that good at it. I've done it a couple times, and it's not as fun for me. So, I mean, what about you?
To me, it's first, I should say too, this is my first documentary. These guys have done it here. In fact, I love George. I love Umbrellas. I didn't know you did all those. Oh yeah, love those. But what I do is more like narrative film, like feature filmmaking in commercials. There's budgets, there's actors, there's a million people on the set, there's 35 millimeter film. To me, that's more like filmmaking than, for me, the documentary was. Now, the distinction is this. The way you can start now is, obviously, you don't all of a sudden cross over and start making studio films. You start small and you start putting stuff together. But in documentary, the technology's gotten to a way to where you can get some phenomenal imagery. You can put some great stuff on video, on HD, and I see myself as borrowing from the documentary technology and going low budget in terms of doing the first scripts. I mean, we've got like 3 or 4 scripts we're developing. We also raise money for films. So that's definitely something that we would start, that I want to do, and that we're in the process of starting to do. But it'll be small. It'll be, it won't be, it's not like you go to Hollywood. It's not like you get a studio film. It's not like that. But you start off with the short films, and you develop the smaller projects, and that's the route I think I would take.
Clearly, there's makers who just are moving between those two worlds much more fluidly, I think.
Now, yeah.
Technology. So exciting.
Yep.
Yeah, and what I'm also hearing is that I think that, a particular subject matter requires a certain approach. Like maybe it's better to do it as an animated film, or maybe it's better to tell the story as, a combination of fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah, we're very opulent, large production for one project, and something very rough and intimate. It just depends on how you want the style that you communicate in.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I can think about, you could easily make a sort of fictionalized dramatic film about your subject, but it loses some intensity. I mean, like it's those incredibly immediate moments, like meeting Leah and seeing the pain in her face and just knowing that this is someone's actual life and this is heartbreaking.
Well, I think the viewer kind of picks up on this whole idea of a moment that could never be repeated.
Yeah.
And, that's a big difference in your fiction mindset. I mean, people go into there are these kind of unspoken rules that we kind of adhere to as soon as we sit down to see a fiction film and a nonfiction film. You get it's different heads. I think it's really interesting.
That's true.
I just I found these audio tapes with my dad that nobody's ever heard before. And my dad says, he's like, well, for example, the film Salesman would have been the perfect research piece for someone who wanted to make a fiction film about salesmen. That if every fiction filmmaker did the documentary first as a study to then do the fiction film, but I'm not interested in that. But he thought of it that way too, that it was like what he got from reality would benefit the fiction film world. I guess that's what I.
And they were very much about rebelling against Hollywood at that time.
Made a fiction film.
Yeah.
Right.
He didn't have the attention span.
People who came to the studio, they were not committed to documentary.
Well,
they were going to move to fiction.
Yeah, the whole other thing that documentary is the poor cousin of feature films, and everybody uses it as a stepping stone and stuff like that. And that's probably true in some cases, not in mine.
I'm sure a lot of people, though, and you could name the directors that have copied that have tried to capture those characters. David Mamet, look what he did. I mean, Glengarry Glen Ross. I mean, you see instances, in like the Barry Levinson film. Tin Men.
Right.
But I was talking to one of our directors. Is this guy he's done big, $100 million movies, big movie guy. He's one of he's always like, I want to be doing, kind of like small stuff with you guys. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? You work with everyone. You do big movies. And he said, you just cannot, you can't get that truth and that honesty. He goes, I could never get that you can get in documentary. And he goes, it doesn't matter how much, very few films can do that, if any. And that's one thing that, like a film like Salesman, there's nothing like that honesty and purity of character. You can't get that anywhere,
Yeah.
Now that Hollywood is really recognizing the documentary, and I mean, at Rebecca, you're reading more about the documentaries than anyone. Do you think that that's going to corrupt documentaries, or not? Or would that be good for documentaries, or bad?
Seems good. Any new, branching out of the form and new places for it to show is always seems good to me.
I think so. Yeah, Michael Moore. He opened it up. Errol Morris is a guy that opened it up, and I think it's got to be all good. The one thing that is happening is now, because of the technology, like we're talking about, is the ease of. There's a lot more stuff out there, but that isn't great. And there's a lot. So. But to the good side of that, I think good things will possibly come to the forefront,
And I think distributors sort of take you more seriously instead of being like, oh, you have a documentary. It's now like, oh, you have a documentary. Like, it's sort of it could potentially be a hot property, whereas, 10 years ago, I don't think that they would have looked at you like that. So that's sort of nice to think you could get wider distribution. Although I am very, sort of upset in some ways by this sort of, bastard child called reality TV. I don't.
Oh, I like that.
I don't know.
I wouldn't know how to do it.
I find it so mean-spirited.
It's very manipulated. It's manipulated.
It's totally crass. It's wonderful.
I just don't know why people are so into that. meanness. But
I love it. Herzog, was it? Yeah, Herzog at Sundance. Somebody asked him about. Was he threatened by? Because he had a documentary, and he goes, "No, we will out-art them, we will outsmart them," and he goes on. And it was fantastic.
And he could out-mean a lot of people. Yeah,
That's true. Is there any more questions about? Sure.
Can you talk about putting a crew together and working with a documentary crew? I mean, not knowing when you're going to end or start or things like that. Like, I'm just very interested in how you keep a crew together when you have no real.
Well, we know. Can I answer that?
yeah.
Well, we do a lot of head work in advance. We don't just go out and randomly shoot. You develop your you figure out your idea, you figure out the focus of your story, and then you sit down with your producer and you map out. I mean, you might deviate from it, but you map out. You have to work within a budget. You have to work within a production schedule. You have to know what kind of crew and camera you're going to have. It's just like, again, it goes back to, it's just like any other film. And then, so you kind of, a lot of it, like on this film, we allotted 10 trips to Boston and 50 days of shooting. And then it was a small crew. It was just 4 of us. So 2 of the PAs were Boston guys, and we'd call them up with as much advance notice as possible and say, we're coming up this weekend. And so, but it was basically, we're just parceling out the days and calling people, changing plans quite a bit, but trying to stick to it as much as possible. I mean, I know a lot of people think we just shoot.
Well, I mean, it's funny you asked that question because I have a kind of a funny answer. It's just my crew was, and everyone, my production company, everyone kind of make fun of me because, I mean, in commercials, I keep going back to that because it's a type of filmmaking. I mean, there's money, there's people carrying bags, there's assistants, there's I just stand on the camera, I just go here, thing, it was me and a DVX 1000, mini DV camera. There was and I had some wireless mics, and that was it. And I shot 90 hours of film. 100. And it was. So I didn't have any production. I just, phone would ring and I'd go and shoot this. I read something in the Globe. A Globe reporter would call me, give me a lead. I'd go shoot somewhere else. I'd go here. And so it was. But the great part about that was as a commercial person, advertising, you lose your sensibilities as a filmmaker. The things you go out that you want to do, your ideals of making films, and this put me back on the street like a still photographer, and
not controlling the frame so much.
Yeah, exactly.
In commercials, because I do them too. It's all, even when it's real people stuff, it's all about having like a 20 or 30 man crew behind you to control every color that's in the frame, even if it's supposed to be loose and slick dock and all that kind of stuff. So
and you lose touch, though you try to make it arty and real and truthful.
You got 50 people making it real,
right.
When you're doing a spot, so you don't have control when you shoot the way you're talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, it was fun. It was just me with one camera, and I started, I kind of learned things again. Learned how to be a photographer again. I learned how to be a cinematographer. I learned how to set up frames that now I set up the way I shoot things. Now I bring it to my commercial work. It was great. It was a great thing to do.
I don't even know what we're talking about.
Given the controversy surrounding your films, do you feel an obligation to the subjects beyond telling the story, especially maybe in post-production?
I don't quite understand what you mean. An obligation to
the subjects, in the sense they're telling very personal stories, and there's a line that you're walking between telling the story, and then maybe you could cross over that line if you're not careful to an exploitation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I always kind of feel a responsibility to my subjects in some way. So, I definitely did for this film. It was a little different for me in this film because I had 2 main characters and one of them wasn't alive, and there was a wealth of material about her to kind of go through, and she was a very controversial figure. So I definitely did feel like the need to be extremely rigorous in researching her and portraying her. but any film that you make, as we were talking about before, in documentary with your subjects, you are really obligated in a way to get to know them and to love them and to see it through, all aspects of their characters. So I definitely felt that way with this film, but I'm not sure it was because it's a controversial subject.
Yeah. I mean, my only answer is that I haven't yet wanted to exploit my subjects when I've made a film, and it has not ever served the film well, nor my reputation, nor my relationship with my subjects so far in life.
Probably,
but you never know. I mean, really. Some people, like Harmony, again, I keep thinking about working with Harmony Korine. He uses, and Herzog, they use a kind of, it's not my style, I don't think I can do this, but they use a kind of exploitation and intimidation to get what they want. I mean, so it's like I don't want to get religious about it. So.
Yeah, no, ours was controversial. I mean, it was tough. I mean, but people really felt like they wanted to get their stories told, and they opened up. There's a little Michael Moore aspect to the stuff, like that. Places that I went to that I wasn't supposed to. Bishops didn't want to talk to me. I got thrown out of places and stuff. But that's part of the fun.
Do you include yourself in the?
I don't. I didn't do that. Again,
so it's like the filmmaker kind of.
It is, and it's the thing is, we do have it's a lot of interviews, and there's no narration. And I wanted the whole thing just to be kind of told through, the interviews act as all the narration, and then just B-roll and image stuff,
right?
To work with the film.
Yes.
One footnote about I have a student who is a professional I see on reality shows. They told me they use 17 cameras in the boardroom on The Apprentice. 17 different cameras filming simultaneously. It's a completely bizarre medium in terms of camera coverage. But I have a question, which is all your films seem to involve changing things, like interacting and changing the world, within which you're making your films, finding the paintings, or just informing people, maybe influencing them. So I just have a question about the political climate in this country, and it seems like a lot of the political, we have almost a civil war being fought through the media right now. And as filmmakers, do you have a sense of what you could do, what you can do, or what your responsibility is in terms of political climate we have, and how you might enact or change in this environment we live in today?
I don't. In terms of my film, I try not even to take any of that into a thought, because I think it's doing such damage in the country. The two-sidedness of so many things. So. I see it as holding up a mirror to something, to kind of a time period that went on through these churches last year, and whatever it does after that, fine, But I don't see in any way, affecting change in any other way other than the film standing on its own and people talking about it. It's like you put it out there, and then you look for the kind of reactions you get. And if you get some, and people are talking about it, great. I think that's great, But in terms of influencing in any way, I mean, like some guys do. You've talked about Michael Moore.
Political agenda.
Yeah, exactly. These agendas or people, to me, that's not my style. That's not my style.
Fred Wiseman, too.
Who?
Fred Wiseman.
Social.
Had an agenda, but
Yep. And you see it coming, and I think then you lose that truthfulness we were talking about, like what those interviews you get and the honesty.
Well, I wasn't primarily politically motivated to make the Same-Sex America film. I'm not an activist. I'm interested in other, focusing on it. I'm not motivated politically as a filmmaker. That's not what the spark. That's not what sparks me. So.
What sparks?
It's like I'm really interested in trying to show people what it's like to see the world through other people's eyes, perhaps, and maybe experience what other people experience. I'm interested in reflecting, trying to explain to the world maybe who I am through my filmmaking and try to maybe identify with other people. And I'm kind of skeptical that I think I don't usually talk about politics that much, but it's like it seems that there seems to be a feeling that politics are what are going to change the world, and I think I have a kind of a problem with that. I think that there's a little bit too much weight on its importance in our culture. I mean, I think it's important, but it's like I'm not really seeing politics as the answer out there right now. So, yeah.
Right.
So it's it's just a personal thing.
So what are your next films?
I'm working on a fiction film, which is a romantic comedy, which is a big, huge departure for me, but I'm excited about it.
I'm doing a project. Well, it could be either about adultery, or adoption, or death. I don't know. It's one of those three.
My next film's a 30-second film on Crayola crayons. That's my next film coming up.
Commercial?
Yeah. But in terms of something bigger, I mean, I have an idea of a film that I'm starting, and I mean, I like the heavy subjects. My next one's going to be on death and dying. I'm involved with hospice, and another big subject this year, especially with the Terry Schiavo case.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, if you've read a lot of the great, I mean, all of a sudden, man, people, all of a sudden, dying became an issue to talk about again, and no one does really, And I think it'd be an interesting film. So.
Are there any other last questions? I had a quick question actually for you, Rebecca, which is at the beginning of our panel, you said that you were really haunted by one painting in the museum. Are you still haunted by the disappearance of that painting, or are you just kind of sick of it because you made this film and it's too much time,
I do feel I sort of came through something in terms of making the film about my kind of relationship to that painting and to feeling haunted by it. But I still, it's still there. I mean,
which one is it? The Vermeer?
It's the Vermeer. Yeah, I still definitely think about. I don't know. Maybe there's something very particular about the fact that the empty frame just sits there, forever. That I do think about sometimes.
Wow, that's great. Well, I encourage you all to see the films. They're really remarkable. I was really, incredibly moved. There are moments I cried, and moments I just kind of shook my head in disbelief. I mean, it's just all the good things that you want in a documentary. And I think, in a lot of ways, it's kind of with some of the films, it is kind of a call to action because you start to care about the people that are experiencing these kind of unspeakable things, or just, people who are so invested in what they're doing that you really feel that passion and you really connect with it. So I thank you for making these beautiful films, and I thank you for being here. I hope you can come out to all the films, and maybe you can spend the day at the MFA to see, Same-Sex America and Closed on Sundays. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
You did a great job.
Yeah, here's them again.
My father...
jury comprised in the feature, documentary, and short categories. We have 3 members in each jury, and each of these jury members gets all these videotapes in the mail from Adam, and they watch all the movies, and then they decide who wins the prizes. And we do this, a couple weeks ago, and so we've known for a couple of weeks which one of you guys have won. You, the guys in the nicer hotels, are the winners probably. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway... We like to keep our awards ceremony kind of quick because we know there's free booze upstairs, and we just like to, it's all about just having fun and, just honoring you guys for coming out here and showing excellent movies and being here for Q&As and stuff. So, first of all, thank you to the filmmakers. We'll give you a round of applause, everybody.